Welcome to IDG Chit Chat Live for the week of January 26, 2015. On this episode, we will be talking about Genealogy Roadshow Season 2, Episode 3 from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Combs-Bennett. I'm the Creative Director with the In-Depth Genealogist. Joining me this evening are Terry O'Connell, Executive Director, and Sharon Atkins from It's All Relative. Unfortunately, Jen Alford isn't able to join us this evening, so it's only going to be the three of us, but welcome, ladies. Glad to have you.
Hey, Shannon, how are you?
So this week's episode of Genealogy Roadshow took us to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. As always, this is your spoiler alert for the show. Don't proceed unless you want to know more about it, and you have been warned. So I have to say, they're doing a spectacular job at picking amazing venues for this show this season. I haven't been to the Franklin Institute, but I think the next time I'm in Philly, which isn't very far from me, I'm going to have to swing by. Have either of you been there by any chance?
No, I've not.
Oh,
I believe I've walked past the outside.
I think I have. I think that's about the extent of my I've been there too, is I've go look at that pretty building.
But
But yeah, it was an amazing place. I think I'm going to have to go research it a little bit more.
it's beautiful.
Well, we have an absolutely packed show today, so we need to get moving on our impressions about the show. Plus, I want to make sure that we had enough time to talk about the interview that occurred yesterday with Mary Tedesco. She talked with BayouBuzz.com, and it's a really good interview. And yes, I am teasing the audience a little bit there, so stay tuned to the end where we're going to discuss that. Before we get started, I did want to give an update because last week, Pat, dear Myrtle, asked a question. She wondered out loud if the participants on the show received anything with the documents in them that they had from the show. And if you remember last week, we all assumed that this was probably the case, but nobody really knew for sure. Well, I reached out to someone familiar with the show, actually two people who have been involved with the show, and yes, those people who are shown on the program do actually receive documents discussed in the segment. So there you have it, everybody. There's your answer, official. Which I'm glad to hear.
That's cool.
I would have hoped they would have walked away with something and not just a good memory. So,
It's funny, this week I was looking for them on the tables.
oh, how were you? So let's see here. There were a lot of segments and pretty diverse again. And I want to stay real quick because we were commenting before the show went on air about the segment on the library in Salt Lake City. And Sharon has been there. Unfortunately, Terry and I haven't been there yet. But we're planning to go, so we will be at Roots Tech FGS in 2 weeks. But Sharon was giving us some tips. I'm greatly appreciating that.
It's a wonderful place to go to, and it's just there's never enough hours. You always want it to. You want more, even though you're bleary-eyed and can't stand to look at one more piece of microfilm. It's a wonderful place to go. The only thing I will pre-warn you at, I get seasick when I do too much microfilm at the one time. So if you're going to do a lot of microfilm, I try to break it. I might go to microfilm first and then go look at some books and then go back to microfilm.
Now, I did notice Kenyatta Berry, because she was the one who did the segment. They let Josh stay home, I guess, this time.
Yeah.
And I noticed she was using the old film crank.
Microfilm.
Yeah.
Right. I think those old ones, I don't know for sure, but I know that when I had to get one that I really wanted magnified, there's only a couple of those left.
Oh,
And
okay.
those might be the older machines.
Okay.
That's where I went.
Because to be honest with you, I haven't used one machine like that since college because I go to the Library of Virginia very frequently, and I've gone to the National Archives, and they all have the digital ones. So
Yeah,
were you
there's just a few of the digital ones on the third floor. I didn't get down to the international floor, so I don't know, and I know that's where you ladies said that you were going to be aiming for.
Well, at least Terry is.
Yeah.
I'm going to be digging into my Indiana Midwestern roots a little bit, I think. But, speaking of the library, and, as researchers, we go to the library quite a lot, or other archives. we all agreed that we really liked in this episode how they are highlighting the unusual or the not frequently sought after records for research. And each segment in this had a different type of record that maybe a lot of people, unless you're a very experienced genealogist, you might not realize that you can go to research. Is there any highlights that you ladies thought of that you would like to talk about first, and we can just keep going from there?
The one thing that I really liked they pointed out was with the lady that did the research on the Viking story, on that descendant line that she was looking at, and how she thought that she might have found something but wasn't sure and wanted validated. And they came to the book later on in the segment where she must have found her original data that said that this particular ancestor was related to the kings and the queens of the Viking world.
Right, right.
And then Josh brought out more recent data than that book. And that's the part I liked. The part I liked was they showed two different sources that might have been considered in conflict with each other, but one was more recent. And I liked the fact that it was subtly pointing out that even when you find something that you think is good, definitive, well-sourced information, it's only as good as the time as when that was published. Right. So it's wise to go look at something that's might have been published since then. And he did with the New England Journal.
Right. I think I liked, I'm going to jump in real quick before I let Terry speak, was I liked in the very beginning of it before they sat down with Joshua, how she said, I just want to know if I'm correct or if I'm gullible. And that was just one of those relatable statements, because I'm pretty sure I've thought that too. What about you, Terry?
I think we all have a line where we're like, oh, is that really it? Or like she said, am I being gullible and believing it? I know I have quite a few lines that are holding out on the am I gullible verdict at this point. But yeah, it was a great segment, and I definitely agree with all the different resources and going back and looking again. But probably my favorite thing out of that one was the Old English baptism.
Oh, yes.
Really cool.
Yes. That was a cool record.
I
wish he had said how he found that.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I think that may be one of our genealogy curiosity questions. So where did you find it?
Yeah.
Tell me.
I want to go there too.
Right. So I have a thing for maps, because I have found a lot of interesting family information that's helped me not only, confirm, but lead me to more clues for my family. So the segment on the loyalist ancestor.
Right, that was cool.
Yeah, where they bring out the map and they have the plats and there's the person's name on their land. I just love those, because people sometimes don't think about how you can use maps or plats and things like that to confirm, what if you had, if you had a deed with all the names written out, maybe you could go to the plat and say, oh, look, he's a neighbor. Or this one lives across the street, or, or this is where the land was and how big it was, and these were the people around it. And you can really get a good sense of community that way.
Did you happen to notice at the very end of that segment where the young man said, and my grandfather built a home on that land? And I'm thinking, he knew all along that land was there.
I know.
Well, I think he mentioned it, that they had land there. I don't think he really...
It would have been fun to look at this map today.
Yeah.
To compare it. Yeah.
Or to show the deed for the land or something. Why didn't they use that to go, backwards and forwards to make a connection?
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
And this is family still owned the land.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, not a lot of families still own the land, let alone a house that many, several generations later, unless you live in the middle of nowhere or, I guess, in Canada. So
maybe he didn't know that the land that the house was on had been originally owned.
That is true. That is very true.
Yeah.
By the family or passed down. But it would have, if it indeed is the same land. But that would have been interesting to have Josh connect the two.
Right. So, any other records that caught your attention? How about you, Terry? I haven't heard from you in a little bit.
Let's see. I not one record per se, but the whole segment on the Whitakers and how she started her with that, just the box from Grandma's attic or wherever it was in Grandma's house, and how she went through it and pieced it all together. And I thought that was an amazing little grouping of things that she was looking through.
Well, those are unusual records because she did find a series of letters.
Yes.
So sometimes people forget that letters can lead you to more genealogical clues.
Isn't that what we call ephemera?
Yes, ephemera. And why can't I ever find a box like that? I mean, seriously. What it reminded me of, well, one, I thought it was funny because my husband and I, we always watch the show together, and we're watching this segment, and he turns to me and he's like, "Have you received your letter from Uganda this week?" You know, these scams and these send me money emails that people get, and then like not 2 beats later, it was, you know, it's one of those email scams. I'm like, oh my God.
They read his mind.
But it also reminded me of all of those, and this kind of actually ties in again to the Norse one about the man who wrote, you know, the hundreds of thousands, not the thousands, but the hundreds of fraudulent genealogies in the 1800s, Gustav Anjou. So once again, people were not always nice. There have been scams for hundreds of years, right?
I'm just saying human nature doesn't change that much.
There you go.
It's just, you got to find, you know, who are the party goers in your ancestors' lives so we can find the good stories.
Were you surprised, Terry, to find that he went to jail in that newspaper article? Since you like forbidden ancestors?
You know, tell me they're going to jail, I love it. I'm like, tell me more. Get the newspapers out. Where are the court records?
You know, I don't... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, speaking of newspapers, there was a lot of good newspaper stories weaved into several of the stories.
Yes.
That they did.
Yes.
And I thought that was really interesting. Like the lynching story, that murder had a lot of newspaper stories with it. Even the Loyalist one had a newspaper story with it.
Right. And I think some people forget that, you know, yes, there were newspapers that long ago.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Who
Go ahead,
else had newspapers? I was just trying to look my notes. Who else had newspapers that were in their stories?
I think that was it. For newspapers, I think that was it.
Yeah.
And of course, the court records, the one on the South Carolina story about the lynching, being for her to be able to get the court records and, you know, basically recount the entire story in that great of detail. Records like that, especially, you know, obviously court records to some extent are public records, so you just have to know where to look and find them. I thought it was pretty amazing.
It was.
Go ahead, Terry. Were you going to say something, Terry? I'm sorry.
No, I just agreed. It definitely was.
Sorry, Sharon, for interrupting.
That's all right. I think that Kenyatta did a wonderful job in presenting the summary of that whole story.
She really did.
Yeah, she obviously knew the story, but she presented it in a very unthreatening way.
And when you deal with sensitive matters like that, you kind of have to, you know.
Sure.
I have found some odd, unexpected family stories, you know, through newspaper articles, through court records, especially chancery records here in Virginia. And sometimes when you're reading these, your mind just, you know, how am I going to ever be able to relate this to somebody else?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, human nature once again, you know. You know, the father against son sometimes, or somebody killing somebody, or, you know, beating people, and I thankfully haven't had to tell a client these types of stories yet. But, telling your family sometimes is hard enough. So yeah, I think she did an excellent job in relating it, what had been a very emotional type of story for her.
Right. I think
So,
she did a great.
I think she definitely did a great job. So I liked the Portuguese story because we got to see draft records.
Yes, that was cool.
Yeah.
She was, she another one who said she, not family folklore, but it was words like that she used. I don't remember exactly what it was, and how the actual story for her turned out better because of the military connection.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that one. Of course, this is going to sound terrible. I'm reading ahead, on the draft card, and I'm like, look, there's his birthplace. Why are they talking about his birthplace? Look, it's right there on the screen. 30 seconds later, like, and if you notice, and I'm like,
I noticed.
But I really liked that story. That was a nice. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it was a good one.
Yeah, and she did the record and showed how you really have to mine each record for all the data that's in it, because she went back to it 2 different times.
Which is a good point to remind people, because sometimes I've gone back to a record, and I'm like, how did I miss this the first time around?
Yeah.
Because, it's a good reminder to all of us experienced researchers that you have to go back again.
Yeah.
I did that with something that broke down like a mini brick wall that I had. So, starting to go through and just transcribe everything instead of just reading it, so that you really are pulling every piece out of it.
Yes. Even the bad spelling.
Yeah, the bad spelling. Keep track of it all.
Yeah.
What? Bad spelling?
Never happened, does it?
That's right. Doesn't happen. So were there any other stories or record sets particularly that really talked to you in this episode? I think we might have almost covered all of them.
Well, they showed the ship manifest.
Ship manifest.
Mm-hmm. That was something different.
I liked the little short about the young girl wanting to do some research on the Black Panthers. And it wasn't about tell me, it was about where can I go and find.
Right.
I really liked that it was good. One, to see somebody so young having an interest, and, two, Kenyatta being kind enough to, instead of saying, oh, well, here's all the information, well, you can go here, and then don't forget here, and, oh, and this is a good place, too. I liked that.
I also like how they introduced her as a researcher. I can't remember exactly what they called her. They didn't call her a novice genealogist, maybe a beginning genealogist, but they used the G word to let you know that she's been doing some work. So that was nice to have a little interaction there, I thought.
Yeah.
How about you, Sharon? Any other records that you can think of, or a story that you thought was particularly?
We spoke about a little bit on a couple of the clips how they tried on the real short segments to talk about the 2 different presidents that they had people to link to, one being Eisenhower and one being Washington. So I thought it was interesting how they dealt with both of them a little bit differently.
Right.
One win and one not win.
Yeah. Well, I did like how I think it was Kenyatta who did both of them, correct? Or am I mistaken?
I know she did Eisenhower.
And she did Washington.
Yeah.
Okay. She did both of them. So, with one, she had to break the news that, the Washington didn't have any children, which was which if you didn't know that, it was kind of like, oh, okay. And then the other, how she showed, well, this person is, I liked being able to see this is the common ancestor between the 2 branches, because and this is how many cousins you removed and blah, blah, blah you are. So that was a nice fundamental execution, I guess you could say.
Yes.
The one this reminded me, I know he's not a president, but, a founder of a colony, the William Penn story.
Uh-huh.
I thought that one was interesting because it was negative evidence. They couldn't prove it or disprove it.
Right.
And Joshua made sure to say that just because they couldn't prove it doesn't mean it's not true. So he kind of left it as an open end. There needs to be
Right.
continued research, which I thought, that's an important point to also bring up because people might not, they might think, oh, I can't find anything. I'm never going to find anything. And that's not true. It might take you 20 years, but you might find the information.
Yeah. Right. You just got to keep looking.
Yeah.
You're right, though, because I don't think on any of the TV shows that discuss genealogy, I don't think they've ever gone with we can't prove it, we can't disprove it.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been one answer or the other. So it is nice to see the middle ground of, oh, well, yeah.
Isn't that more the case than not?
Yes.
My gut tells me this. I just don't have the proof yet.
Right. I mean, there's more reality to that.
Yeah. And, and once again, we as the audience will never know what was left on the cutting room floor, and there may have been more information given and at any point in any of these stories. But, it goes through the researchers, and it goes to the story people, and then it goes to the shooting, and then an editor gets it, and goodness gracious knows what's going to come out on the other end sometimes. I would just, one of these days I want to sit down with somebody and go, so tell me the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm. There are quite a few of them that I would love to hear the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We should suggest that to Genealogy Roadshow from now, the rest of the story.
That's right. I think it would be a great website feature.
Yeah.
Even who you think you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys have ideas. That's just dangerous.
Cut that out.
That's right. What are you thinking?
Well, I just think it's important because some of this research, and when I thought of who do you think you are, the first one that came to my mind was the Rosie O'Donnell one, because it talked about the Irish poorhouses and everything, and you don't really hear a lot of talk about the research in the poorhouse records. Mm-hmm. So it's something I would like to see more of. So she was just the first one that came to mind, that it's just so important to be able to see what their process was and where it went afterwards. Mm-hmm. What we didn't see, I just would love to see that.
It just proves that you're a true researcher at heart, Terry. Oh. Have to have that little bit of information.
Yes, important.
Okay, well, we're coming up towards getting ready to wrap up, so I had promised a discussion about the Mary Tedesco interview that happened yesterday. And Terry and I both watched it live. Sharon didn't get a chance to see it, but I hope that you will have some comments on some of the things that we're going to talk about, and I will make sure that in our blog post for this episode we have a link so that anybody, and I will put it here as well, anybody who wants to go watch this interview can go see it. It's 43 minutes long, approximately, so it's something that you definitely need to schedule to have time to watch. It's not like a short 5 or 10 minute clip that you could watch over your morning coffee. But okay, so she was interviewed on a website yesterday called BayouBuzz.com, and the owner or host of the website, his name is Stephen. I'm going to butcher this. I'm going to do my best. I listened to it 3 times, so hopefully I get it right. Sabladowski. He's the owner of Bayou Buzz and was the host. And then he had 2 co-hosts with him yesterday. Erin Brady, who was Miss USA 2013, and a man named Ben Fisher. And then, of course, Mary Tedesco from PBS Genealogy Roadshow. And it was a really interesting interview. We got to see some her thoughts on the show, what she hopes the future of the show will be, and a little bit of a behind-the-scene type of thing on how they do stories and do some of the research and stuff like that. Terry, was there anything that really stuck out in your mind before I kind of go through my notes that I have here?
I don't think anything in general stuck out in my mind. I think the whole interview was a really good interview, but I have to say I really liked the dynamics of it.
Yes, it was very good.
It was very interesting. They all were interested in their family history and wanted to know more. And I think by the time they were done with the interview, they wanted to know more than when they started.
Right. So it was told, the three people on the show didn't know anything. I mean, they were obviously, novice slash not really sure what genealogy was. So it was a really good program to show people who aren't in the field already because they asked those types of questions. Well, how did you get involved with genealogy?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you do this? And I loved that she talked about how it takes a village to do a show because, there are so many researchers and so many pieces. And of course, she used the word that I like to throw around, especially when I do social media lectures, which is about how technology and genealogy nowadays with social media and other different types of platforms, crowdsourcing, genealogy crowdsourcing to solve problems, do research, connect with people, network, work together on a big project like the indexing project.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all key points that I was so happy she brought up to show people that it's more than just people sitting in a library.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with many people about, you really need to be on Facebook because you just don't understand until you're there. The genealogy community is grand.
Mm-hmm.
They're there to answer your questions. You can't find something, somebody's going to know where to find it. You just throw it out there.
What do you think, Sharon? Do you see that that's the kind of the way that genealogy is moving, especially through social media?
Yeah, and I find it sometimes overwhelming with following the social media. So I try to focus on, one or two platforms. I don't try to do all the platforms. It's just too much for me to keep up with. So I'm looking for someday for somebody to figure out just how to narrow this down to make it more easily managed. And even though you use platforms like Hootsuite or other platforms that help you to bring your social media into one place, it makes it overwhelming sometimes. But back to the point, genealogists have been doing crowdsourcing long before it was a keyword, buzzword to use in the collaboration world and sharing things. Because if you go back to those old forums that we used to have,
right,
to share information on, and even the genealogy websites that were one of the early websites that were built by collaboration of whether it was a society or whether it was somebody working on a cemetery project that really got genealogy off the ground.
Right. Oh, I can't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Going back to some of the magazines, like, what was the big one? This is my favorite one.
Oh.
Leland's magazine. What was it? I can't think of it right now. But it went away maybe 4 years ago.
Well, the Ancestry had a magazine a long time ago. Is that the one you're thinking about?
No, it wasn't Ancestry. I know I've got a copy somewhere too. But anyhow, in the back of it was always about, I'm searching for so-and-so. You can reach me.
Okay.
And probably the other ones had it too. It's just that Leland's was, it was like thick. It was a big magazine. So you're absolutely right, Sharon. Where it's been done for a long time, and it's more about using the right keyword at this point.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So tell me what Mary said about the social networking that stuck with you.
Well, it was to me, okay, so I've done several lectures and I talk to people and I write a little bit about using social media for genealogy because it is overwhelming to a lot of people. I find it overwhelming and I have my fingers in lots of different pies, you could say. But she talked about how, to her, when they asked her, how do you see technology affecting genealogy? To her, it was the group collaboration, technology as we move forward, as it advances. Not only was they were talking about digitization of records and stuff, and yeah, while that is happening and that is going on, and we are sharing a lot more through digitization, it's the getting together, through social media, through Facebook, through those platforms, we're able to connect almost instantaneously with people around the world.
Right, and it's not using the social media to me that's overwhelming. It's the amount of information that's coming in
Oh
to me
yeah.
that's overwhelming.
Oh, that's me. That
Because
is me.
you have to figure out how to filter that to what's relevant and not relevant. And I wish there's some way we could archive some of it that would be easier. I mean, I think the hashtags do it. So if you go back and you want to look at tweets and see if there's somebody hashtagging something, you can do that. But it's still, it's voluminous. It's like going to a restaurant with 9,000 choices. I can't do it.
But the good news is like with Twitter, isn't it all being stored at the Library of Congress?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I remember. It was a long time ago I read that.
Yeah, all the tweets are being stored at the Library of Congress.
Right,
All
and
that useless information.
Right, and you belong to Facebook, different Facebook pages, but unless it comes into my feed, I don't necessarily go and look at them except maybe once a week. Like I watch Iowa genealogy. Well, if it isn't in my feed, then I have to go out and look at that, and catch up with what's going on.
Right, and that is what a lot of people do. I mean, that's what I do. I went through a phase where where I don't know what I was thinking. I joined like 40 or 50 different Facebook groups, and there's no way I am ever going to be able to read those on a daily basis. And I sit down every few days and I go through and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to catch up on these 5 or these 6.
Right.
Or, hey, I'm doing some research on this state. Like I joined the Pennsylvania genealogy group and I joined the Indiana and the Virginia. And like I'll just read a couple pages, just to kind of keep up to date with what's going on. Maybe I'll find something. Occasionally I'll post when I see something that I have something to contribute. But I don't think anybody's a superhuman when it comes to that.
It's funny because there are groups out there that are very adamant they want your participation, and if you don't participate, there's, once a month a thread up about if you're not participating, we're going to drop you. Please let us know you want to be here. Mm-hmm. And on one of them, I finally said, listen, I don't have time to participate in every group. I don't. Yeah. I'm on way too many. Right now I'm focusing on my Irish. So... Right. Going and looking at my German or my Canadian or anybody else is not worth my time right now. When I'm back to those lines, I'll be back again. Yeah. But a lot of those groups are getting really particular about you need to be doing this to be a part of our group, and I think that's sad.
Yeah, but some people want to make sure that there are living people on these groups.
And they don't. I get vet them out. Make sure you're not getting the sunglass sellers.
Right.
Yeah.
No, so we talked about, modern genealogy and, genealogy of the future, but I did like and really appreciated that she put in a plug that you have to know a little bit about history, or at least be able to research and put your ancestors and their experiences into a historical context. Because
I didn't like that.
Oh,
but we're going to go first.
We'll disagree on this one. Well, so maybe it's because of my background. My father was a history teacher. Everything had a historical story to it. We did museums and battlefields and historical places for fun, and I still do. But to me, when, I'm looking at a record and I'm like, I don't understand what's going on here. And I'm like, okay, they're at this date in this place. What was going on historically? And I'm going to go research that. And I'm going to learn about it to figure out, is something going on that is affecting them? Why did they move here? Was there a migration pattern? Was there a war? Was there a famine? And being able to at least know how to find and access that historical data, I think is important for genealogists because it adds to your why they did that.
It also gives you clues to what other records might be available.
All right, Terry.
The reason I disagree with the comment is because you don't have to have that to start. I will tell you, this will shock you, I hated history. I hated history. It was names, it was dates, it was names, it was dates. You had to be able to recite it. That's all the tests were ever about, names, dates. I never had a history teacher that I could say I loved. I had some good ones, but more often than not, they were like mediocre. When my kids were in high school, my daughter had one history teacher. I was like, oh my God, I want to come to history class with you. So I don't think you have to have that love for history to start it, or that you have to have a good history background. I think you have to have thirst for knowledge to be able to move forward and do that. So
I think the value of genealogy today can be to intrigue children to have an interest in history because of their personal connections. I think that you should use the genealogy to teach history as opposed to history to teach genealogy. If you get the point I'm making here. Because when I tell my grandchildren that their second great-grandfather escorted Mrs. Lincoln from the theater to across the street to the boarding house when President Lincoln was shot, that becomes a real story to them.
That's an amazing story.
That's what brings it alive, is stories like that.
You know, at one point I sent a letter to my grandfather's cousin who had never met my grandfather, and he replied. He was 88 years old, and when I got the letter, first of all, I was so excited that he replied, and it was hard to read, but I read it to my son, and we sat there, we talked about it. My son was in high school at this point, maybe a freshman or so, and I said, let's just sit here and think about what this man has lived through, the wars, and it really started to bring these things alive. Before the kids didn't care. They were like, it's whatever, Mom, we don't care. This is your thing, not our thing. And now, I will tell you, I've submitted a story for next season for Genealogy Roadshow, and I texted my son and I said, oh, so I've just submitted this for a TV thing, and if they pick us, will you go? And he's like, I'm there. So,
yep.
Either way, I can see both sides of it, but I just want to say, because I don't want somebody who feels that they're interested in genealogy not to move forward because maybe history wasn't their strong point.
Right.
That's all.
I can see that, but I'm glad that you can agree that you kind of have to be able to find the history to make some of the records make sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think having the thirst for the knowledge of it and wanting to know and starting to, okay, where do I go to find all this? It comes with your starting to do research. I can't tell you how many battle books I've picked up looking for my ancestors' names because I know that they were in this regiment. Before I wouldn't have cared, but now I do. So,
well, there's one last thing I wanted to touch on from the interview before we close for this evening, because
I need to turn this off. I'm going to go answer this.
That's fine. I hate it when that happens to me. It happens at the most inopportune times. But the one thing I wanted to touch on before we leave was that I really liked at the end when the host of the show asked, so what do you tell an 18-year-old who comes to you and says that they are interested in becoming a genealogist? Is there an education platform? Is there something that he needs to do? And Mary handled it very well with the, a genealogist is a continuing education, all that kind of thing. And when they brought it back to the subject of, well, what would you tell that 18-year-old? Are you, is there a platform out there? And she said, I would tell them to follow their passions and their dreams.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
So I think we're having a bit of technical difficulty because for some reason Sharon is muted and we can't get her to unmute.
There you go.
Oh, we got her.
Sorry.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I was getting worried there for a second.
No, I didn't want to interrupt. Sorry about the phone.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It happens. But yeah, I liked the, if a teenager, I shouldn't say a child, if a college student or a young adult wants to become a genealogist, what do you tell them? You follow your passions and your dreams. I think that's a perfect statement. So on that note, unless anybody has any closing comments, I think our time is up for this evening. I want to thank both of you ladies for joining me tonight. It was great to see you again, Sharon. Thanks for
Thank you.
volunteering.
Yeah. It was fun. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Come back anytime. We're happy to talk.
Okay.
So remember,
Talk to you later.
that's right. Remember, everyone, we love to hear from you too. Please drop us a line below in the comments, visit our Facebook page, like us on Twitter, or send us an email at editor@theinDepthGenealogist.com. And on that note, I would like to tell everyone to have a great day, and remember to go in depth with all of your ancestors. Bye.
Bye.